welcome back to another episode of What Woody's Watching. This episode is going to be about what I'm reading, a book called The Actual Star by Monica Byrne. I finished this just recently, and it came out September 2021. I just got the book a few months ago. I had discovered it by simply going online and researching good science fiction books, and this was on an article that I read, a list of like 10 really good books from the past decade or so, and it seemed interesting. So the general description: past, present, and future timelines, 1,000 years apart each, all coming together. I was like, that seems like something I would really like. The past timeline is the ancient Maya in the year 1012. The present day is an American girl who goes to Belize in 2012, and then the future timeline is people from the future in the year 3012 in a completely different society, not like modern day places with futuristic technology or anything. Like, it's a completely different society. Everybody's nomadic with a new religion and everything. So these book reviews I will not be doing very often because it takes me a lot longer to read a book than to watch a movie, but I would like to keep reviewing some of these books that I eventually get to reading. This was a very big book. This is 576 pages in the hardcover copy. The next book I'm planning to read is the 5th book in the Dune series, which is Heretics of Dune. That's like 500-600 pages as well. It's going to be a long time. So it's not going to be as frequent as the regular What I'm Watching reviews. But if you're interested, I will try to review some more books as I get to them. So getting into it, I will keep this spoiler-free in the beginning as always. This book is pretty good. I really liked it. Of course, it appeals to my interests. If you like Cloud Atlas, then I think this is something that could really appeal to you as well. That's kind of something I thought about when I got interested in it, and I think it does a really good job. It's easier to understand, I think, than Cloud Atlas. I've not read the book. I've seen the Cloud Atlas movie, but I remember the first time I saw it thinking, wow, that was like a lot, and I understood it and I thought it was really good, but I didn't understand how all the stories connected until I really thought about it and watched it again and looked some stuff up online. This one is not that hard to follow because each timeline references the past timelines. The modern day timeline knows about the past timeline. For example, the modern day is based on a lot of Belize tourism, where a lot of ancient Maya stuff is used as tourist exhibits. They go into a cave, which was sacred to the ancient Maya, and that is central to the timeline of the ancient Maya timeline. And then the future timeline uses the modern day stuff and the modern day characters as the basis of their future religion. So they all reference each other all the time. It's all well known what happened in the previous timeline. And the way the book is set up with each chapter past, then the next chapter present, the next chapter future, past, present, future, so on, through the entire book. So it's pretty easy to keep track of everything, and it's not super confusing. What is interesting is the languages in this book. There are, well, of course, this book is in English, and pretty much 98% of this book is in English. Probably more like 99 actually. But there are a few other languages that are important in this book. First, in the ancient Maya timeline, they have some ancient Maya languages. Now, the author does say in the notes at the beginning that it is hard, or nobody really knows the exact dialect that was spoken in the area for the specific characters that are used in this book. But the best that she could find when writing this book was Ch'ol, which is the dialect that she uses. It's not a lot. It's just a few words here and there, mostly like when they're at some kind of ceremonial part of the book for the ancient Maya characters. The dialogue and everything is still in English. And in terms of the actual people themselves, the cave that is kind of the basis of everything that connects all the stories is a real cave. And a lot of these cities are real. But a lot of the ancient Maya cities, the only city that they actually knew the name of was called Katwitz, which is mentioned. It's not where the book takes place, but it's like a neighboring city in this. And the names are imagined names, but they are names that would exist at the time, and their lives are, historically accurate to the best ability of the author to, do the research and find out how people lived back then. In the modern day timeline, they use Creole. Now, many of you may think of Creole as a specific language. It's actually a type of language, which is basically a combination of two or more languages, which usually comes as a result of trade or settlement, colonization. And this book uses Belizean Creole. Now, some of you may know that the official language in Belize is English. So this Creole is based in English, but it is also mixed with the native language, as well as some Spanish and some other stuff that would have influenced it over the years. However, if you read this and you read the Creole lines, which is probably the most used foreign language in this book, the Chol, ancient Maya, only has like a few words here and there. The Creole has quite a few lines, because a lot of the characters, the Belizean characters, when they talk to each other, they'll just use Creole a lot of the time instead of using English, because that's what they all speak at home. And I love the fact that she did that for this book, because that would be what people actually speak, the way they actually speak today. And it is based in English, so it is very easy to understand. If you read the words, it's spelled how it sounds. If you sound it out, then you can understand what the English word is supposed to be. A couple words that might be different, you can figure out through context, but it's nothing that challenging, even though it doesn't have any translation specifically for it. And then there's also High Spanish, which is the religious language of La Vieja, which is the religion of the future. It is based on modern Spanish, particularly Mexican Spanish. And if you understand Spanish today, you'll have absolutely no problem understanding the Spanish that's in this book. If you do not know anything about Spanish, it's just a few lines. It's very easy to Google search and figure out what they mean. As well as the fact that there is a glossary in the back, which is about 15 or 16 pages long, which describes a bunch of terms in La Vieja, the religion, that wouldn't have, a direct translation or definition in modern Spanish. And other than that, the only things that are different about this Spanish are the use of gender in the language. Now, Spanish has masculine and feminine gender, but grammatical gender is not the same as human gender. But because it's called gender, and because in languages like Spanish, where the word for man is a masculine word, the word for woman is a feminine word, these two often get confused, but they're not really the same thing. Basically, they're noun class, and in many languages, these classes happen to align so that the words for man and woman are different classes, and so they got called masculine and feminine. But in the future, there is no masculine and feminine in High Spanish from this book. Now, it could be the way that Spanish actually evolves in the future. For example, today, there's a lot of people trying to use more gender-neutral terms and words in Spanish for, social, cultural reasons, for inclusivity and things like that. But in this book, the people of the future are not male and female. They all have male and female organs. So they're all the same in that respect. And the language reflects that. So whether Spanish actually goes that way or not, it's not super important, because in this book, the people actually don't have distinguished genders. And all the people in the future, their pronoun in English throughout the book is she or her. Everybody is a she or her. There are male and female names, what we would think of today as male and female names for many characters in this book. But they all have both sets of organs for a reason that's described in the book. So, yeah, I liked it. I really enjoyed it. It's easy to read. The ending, I would say, is a little underwhelming. I'm not going to say confusing, because I know what happened, or at least I have my interpretation of what happened. It didn't seem that difficult to understand, but it didn't seem like it really wrapped up everything that I was interested in. It kind of only wraps up like one character's story, and I felt like I wanted to know more about the other characters. But, you know, you could leave that up for your interpretation, how everything goes down and what happens after that. But that's how I felt about the ending. Otherwise, I really liked it. It's an interesting look at the future. It's really cool. It's well thought out idea of what a future society could be. And, yeah, I really liked it. So, it's hard to give it a rating, because my rating is made for movies in the movie theater. So it's hard enough to give a rating to a TV show on my scale. But as a book, you know, just going off how I felt about it, off the vibe, I'd say this is like a 7 out of 10. It's pretty good. You know, not super great or anything. But I really enjoyed it. If you find yourself agreeing with a lot of my opinions on my other episodes about movies and TV shows, about science fiction in particular, then I think you'll like this book, and it could appeal to you. If you don't like anything I have to say, then you might not like this book. But if that's the case, then you probably wouldn't be listening. So let's get into some spoilers. If you had read the book, I would be amazed if anyone's listening to this who has read the book. I have like one regular listener, my dad. So if someone out there listened to this, thank you so much. This would be amazing. Or if you're just curious to see what happens, because you're not going to get through a book that's this big. By the way, it's 576 pages. I might have already said that. But in the hardcover version, 576 pages of the story. There's a few more pages of the glossary as well. And acknowledgments in the back. But the story itself, still really long. Almost 600 pages. And I think the way it's set up made it really easy for me to read. I don't typically read as consistently as I did for this book. I read like a chapter, maybe 2 chapters every morning, pretty much, until I finished. But let's get into what I was kind of confused about, the ending. It's all very easy to follow. Up until the last bit, that's when things start getting really science fiction. Of course, there's science fiction in the future timeline. But it's not anything like, the future isn't really asking me to believe in anything that I think is kind of fantasy, you know? Like Star Wars, you know, with the Force and things like that. That's going into the realm of fantasy, right? This book is all just very realistic. It's 1,000 years in the future, so whatever technology they have in the future, yeah, it's pretty much all up for grabs. It could be anything. It's incredible what they could come up with 1,000 years from now. So the stuff in this book doesn't seem unrealistic, you know, and how am I going to judge them for what's 1,000 years in the future? But the end, it just felt underwhelming. And as someone who enjoyed reading all this stuff throughout the book, who liked the characters and everything, the end just felt like it was incomplete. There are some characters I wanted to learn the story of and learn what happened to at the very end. And I just didn't feel like I get that. I feel like I got 1 or 2 characters with a complete story, and the others I'm kind of left to guess or leave up to my own interpretation, which is fine. But I feel like it's not like the story ended and I'm interpreting the meaning of it on my own. It's like the story ended before the characters wrapped up their story. So, with that, I would say also there's a lot of sex in this book, and it doesn't really seem that significant. Like, there's a lot of very graphic descriptions of sex, and it just didn't really have anything to do with the plot. And I'm not saying you can't have sex in a book. It just seems like unnecessary. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Game of Thrones, and it is chock full with sex. I haven't read those books either, but I'm watching the show. I watched the show, and I'm watching the show again. And especially in season 1, there's so much sex in it. But in the later seasons, there's much less, and like it's no different. Like it doesn't lose anything by getting rid of the sex, and if anything, it just seems more respectable and more appealing to a wider audience of people who maybe, aren't interested in seeing that stuff. And this book has so many graphic descriptions of sex, and it didn't seem to really further any part of the plot. Like, some characters form relationships and whatever, but none of those relationships really seem that strong, because it's not like any of the characters formed a lasting relationship out of it. It's just something they do for fun. And yeah, I don't really see the need for it. That being said, getting back to the end, now if you've made it this far, this is a spoiler. I'm talking about the very end of the book. So the ending, I thought was, like I said, incomplete. So I feel like I find out what happens to Leah, and I find out what happens to Ket. And the way I understand it is that they crossed over to Xibalba, right? Because Ket got taken by the jaguar, which is a god in the ancient Maya religion, and Leah finally finds her way through the cave, this sacred cave, in a part of the cave where people wouldn't go, where Xander had tried to go, and he passed out, got washed up back at the beginning of that tunnel. And then Leah makes it through, and she just somehow knows what to do, knows where to go, and she finds Ket there, right? She doesn't know it's Ket, but we know it's Ket because of the description of the girl and everything, and the jaguars. So that, to me, means that she made it to Xibalba. But the people from the future, I don't know. I don't know what happened. And I kind of wanted Nailush to find Leah's body and, like, disprove Xibalba and change La Vieja. I don't know. She just felt like the protagonist to me. Maybe not for everyone who reads this, but yeah, it just seemed that way to me. And I don't really understand what happened to Ishul, right? The sister of the Maya twins. She was in the cave, and then she sees Javier, and she sees people from the future. They all collide into each other or something. This is where, we're getting into more the fantasy part of the science fiction. And it didn't seem like any of their stories resolved, because the story felt like it was heading towards a resolution between the twins who've been reincarnated in the modern day as Javier and Xander, and then in the future as Nailush and Tanaj. And then I don't find out what happens to them. They go on this spiritual journey back through time into their previous lives, and they physically crash into their previous lives. But then what? It just shows Leah going through the cave. So I don't really understand. I mean, I guess I can assume that the twins of the future, understanding what happened to them in the past, they, resolved their differences. Maybe Nailush believed in Xibalba after that. I don't know. It just felt like I didn't get the story arc of those characters complete. I only got Leah and Ket's story complete, and Ket was such a minor character, right? And she disappears so early on and doesn't come back until she meets Leah. And Leah felt like such a main character, and she just disappears, and her disappearance doesn't really seem to affect the other characters. And from what I understand, they seem to be the characters who were formed as the embodiment of the love or the distance between the twins, right? Because the book says their relationship, something became so powerful, like they became physically embodied or whatever. So that's what Ket is to the twins, the ancient Maya twins. That's what Leah is to the modern day Belize twins. And I think that's what Mesa is supposed to be to the future twins, right? Tanaj's daughter, bio daughter, who then supports Nailush. But then again, you don't find out what happens to Mesa either. If she healed or not. If they all went to Shupalba. Like, it just seemed like something big was about to happen. And then the book ends. So that was a bit underwhelming to me. But the rest is all really interesting. It's all really cool. If you're into some of the stuff that I'm into, then I think you'll really enjoy this. If you have seen or read Cloud Atlas and you found that interesting, I think you might really enjoy this. If you're interested to just read a little bit about ancient Maya and a future civilization that is influenced by Maya religion, then I think you'll be interested by this. And if you just want to, look at it for a bit to see its use of language, I think it's really cool. It's really well done. And I recommend it. I recommend it to anyone who would be interested in the stuff that I just mentioned. It's not the best. It's not my favorite book. I would give it a 7 out of 10, which, it's hard to describe books on my scale, which is primarily designed for movies in a movie theater. But that's where I would put this book, 7 out of 10. It was good. It wasn't really great, but I enjoyed it. So if you made it this far, thank you for listening. This will be on Spotify and YouTube. Please like, share, subscribe. Do whatever you can to help us get the word out. And hopefully I can make more of these and make them even better. So thank you very much, and keep loving movies and books.